Hey friend, welcome to Grounded, the vestibular podcast. I'm Dr. Madison Oak, aka the Vertigo Doctor. I am the vestibular physical therapist who is here to help you with all things dizziness, imbalance, and vertigo. In this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of vestibular disorders. Come with me as we dive headfirst into a journey to discover the mysteries of the brain, the inner ear, and the balance mechanisms that keep us grounded. Whether you've been managing dizziness for one day or 25 years, we're going to get real about what it takes to manage dizziness, handle the anxiety cycle, and thrive, not just survive, with your vestibular disorder. First, I want to remind you that this is never medical advice. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and may not be the best fit for you and your personal situation. It shall not be construed as medical advice. The information and education provided here is not intended or implied to supplement or replace professional medical treatment, advice, and/or diagnosis. Always check with your own physician, medical professionals, and healthcare team before trying or implementing any information found here. Meet me in your coziest chair while we navigate the highs and lows, the twists and turns of the vestibular universe. Welcome to Grounded. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grounded. I'm really excited today for the last episode of June. We have Alicia Wolf, who you all know and love. And so I'm excited today to be talking to her. We're just going to have a conversation about all of the things. We were just having a really great conversation before we hit record about like small things and little goals and really congratulating yourself and all the things. So welcome, Alicia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Madison. I'm happy to finally make it here.
Seriously, I am really happy that we made this work. It's been a long time coming. And last week when we tried to record, if you didn't watch Alicia's story, it was chaos. And I'm so glad that we're here and your electric is working and the storm has gone out. Your kid is no longer skunked. All of the things.
Yes, for those who don't know, we had a huge storm in Dallas. We lost power for about 4 days and it was very hot here, and we tried to go out to my parents' house in the country, and one of my kids, my 1-year-old, was playing with the grill, and a skunk had babies back there and decided to spray her and the dog. I made all the mistakes trying to wash it off, and now she still smells like skunk.
She does not.
My son broke his finger. We moved 3 times and now our power is back on. Everything's okay. But I was telling Madison it was a good win for me, and I'm trying to celebrate it because I with all that stress and not sleeping and all those things, I still managed to get through it successfully, try to manage my stress the best way I could, and made it away with only, a mild amount of head pressure, which normally in the past this would have set me back a few days and caused me to be really dizzy. So I'm kind of celebrating that win today.
I am so excited to hear all that. Every time someone's
Yeah.
like, I'm doing the small thing, you're like, I did something really insane and like I'm tired and exhausted and sick of it, but like my symptoms are pretty mild. Like that's always amazing, no matter how long you've been dealing with vestibular migraine.
Yeah, I think part of it is just recognizing like this situation was really hard and it's not a good situation. I had a little mini cry, not too long, but just enough to get it out. And then I felt so much better after. And I took my meds and everything was okay.
I love it. I think that that's perfect. Like,
Yeah.
try it out, take your meds, do the things that you need to do, and just move forward. Like, don't ask, like, why is this happening? Like, you know why it's happening in this case. We don't always know why. In this case, it's pretty obvious, but it's always a good thing to kind of just be like, I'm doing something about it and I'm going to move forward and feel the feels and then be good. That's awesome.
Yeah, because like there's just situations you can't control. And I realized last week that this was so far out of my control. I
Yeah.
mean, who has a skunk in there? I didn't even know. Like at that point, it just started to get funny because I didn't get even into the fact that like all the recipes that I had planned to shoot for the website and do videos for and everything were all frozen recipes. So
Oh,
all ice cream, all popsicles, all everything. And came home and I had like all this red goo leaking out from under
oh.
the freezer. And I'm just This is my life right now.
It's happening, right? It's like we have
Yeah.
to deal with the vestibular component and then deal with everything else. And I know you're a really big advocate for like treating what needs to be treated. And that's something I really like respect about your treatment plan is like, these are things I do, and it's taken you however long to get there. How long, like, give every, like, the listener who's like, I need this to be ready and done with tomorrow. Like, how much
Yeah.
trial and error kind of things did you do to get to a point where you're like, okay, I know what to do in this situation?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still tweaking my treatment plan, and only because I'm so curious in all these new things that are coming out.
Totally.
It's like, ooh, could that be better than what I'm doing now? It's where we have so much available to us that has come available in the time that I was diagnosed. So I was diagnosed with chronic vestibular migraine 8 years. This will be my eighth year. And it was about this time that I was like actually diagnosed. That whole year I had kind of been searching for a diagnosis and seeing several different doctors, and no one could figure out what the issue was with me because I wasn't having head pain with my attacks. So no one wanted to acknowledge it. It was actually migraine.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, then, once I found Dr. Bay, who's my current neurologist now, we started me on a treatment plan that included preventative medication and acute medications, as well as some natural treatments to support it. So, supplements. We did dietary changes. We did, he really supported me on anything I wanted to try. So, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what about acupuncture? What about reflexology? What about massage therapy? He's like, you know what, Alicia, you try it if you want to. And he'd tell me what had evidence and what was kind of
Mm-hmm.
iffy. But honestly, everything that I was on at the time, my preventative was the Timolol drops, and
Mm-hmm.
no one was really talking about them at the time. He was using them very experimentally in his clinic to see if they could help because of how they're administered directly into your eye could potentially help symptoms faster. And Timol on its own as a medication can be used as a preventative in pill form. So you're getting a lighter amount of the medication in eye drop form. So it just kind of made sense. And it worked with the fact that, like, if I wanted to get pregnant in the future, it could be a medication that I could potentially stay on. So it just made sense for me to start with that along with a few other things. And that was a big, trial and error piece for me. It's, probably about 2 to 3 years after I started all of those treatments was when I started getting to that migraine remission where I wasn't having any attacks at all for months and months. And so that's when I started coming off of those medications, and only having my acute treatments around. I kept up with him once a year, and we still have a once a year meeting, even if I'm feeling good. Once I started IVF and went to the process of trying to have children, was when things changed for me. So I kind of had to go back to it, but from a different perspective, because even some of the medications that were safe for pregnancy, I felt uncomfortable with because I had a history of pregnancy loss at this
Mm-hmm.
point and struggling to get pregnant. And so I had to balance what was going to help with my migraine attacks and keep me to a controlled state with what I felt comfortable with taking as I continued on this journey. So I leaned a lot more into the devices. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time the devices were coming out, we looked at Gammacor and Cephally, which were the two main ones at the time. Now there are a
So
few.
many.
Yeah, yeah, they're really coming out. And we decided to go with Gammacor because I didn't have that head pain component, as well as I dealt more with anxiety and um, nausea and those kind of symptoms that would involve like the gut brain connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought maybe from that perspective, the vagus nerve stimulation that Gammacor does would be better for me. And it actually really helped me through pregnancies because I had so much nausea through both
Mm-hmm.
of my pregnancies. And then with Lila, I had hyperemesis. So we bumped up my Gammacor sessions at that point. And all this to say now I'm coming down off of those sessions. I'm only using vagus nerve stimulation at night before bed and then as needed for attacks. I'm always looking at new supplements and kind of tweaking things I've come that have come along, including my diet too. I went from an elimination diet to doing more of a Mediterranean style way of eating. So it's just always a process. Like even when whether you're feeling symptoms constantly or whether you're in this path where you're kind of in maintenance mode, it's just always a process to kind of tweak and see, oh, could this be better? Or could this be managed better? Am I doing all the right things? Um, and it's kind of a thing that you always have to deal with, I guess, as someone with migraine. That doesn't mean it's a burden. I feel like it contributes to my overall health to feel this
Totally.
way or to think this way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Even exercise,
yeah.
that's changed a lot for me too. Like initially when I was diagnosed, I couldn't even walk down the street. I had to hold on to things, or I would have to just literally only walk to my mailbox. And now I'm able to do resistance training and weightlifting and all those great things. So that has changed as well.
hmm That makes me so happy that it's like a whole thing that you can I know this about you, right? Like I know you
Yeah.
do a lot of things, but I think a lot of people see maybe like people on Instagram, and I know that you do a good job of like talking about all the things you do and like showing yourself using Gammacor and all of that. But I still think a lot of times from what I hear from some people is like, well, like what is just like the one thing that I can do? What's the best medication? What's the best acute? What's the best everything? And it just doesn't exist. Like
Yeah.
I was recording one of these podcasts a couple months ago with Courtney, and if you haven't gone listen to that episode, it's about she has triple PD, Meniere's disease, and vestibular migraine, and she's doing so, so well. And we decided that the single thing that you can do is all of the things and try them and
Yes,
determine
that's
whether or not
true.
they work for you.
I always tell people it's focus on your attitude, because having
Yes.
a good attitude about it and having hope, I think will get you through the most of
hmm
everything, because that opens you just doing all the things, because you have
Exactly.
hope that something will work.
That's funny. I interviewed Emily Kostalnik, and she is the second week of June. So by the time this comes out, her episode will be out. And
Okay.
the whole time she was like, you just have to have hope. Like there has to be hope. And that was
Yes.
like the beginning and the end of our conversation. So it's so funny that it comes up again. And the
Yeah.
two of you have like very, very different treatment protocols. Like couldn't be more different, frankly. But it's really just like what works for your body, right? And both of you are
Mhm.
like models for like this does get better, things can get better. Like you can feel so awful you literally can't walk to your mailbox, and a couple of
Mhm.
years later be like I have kids and I'm doing all the things, and like I'm walking my kid to preschool and I go to the grocery store and I do all of the things, and like with little to no symptoms on most days. And does that mean that like
Yeah.
I stop my treatment because, oh, I feel perfect all the time? No, that means your treatment protocol is working and you need to keep doing it. And someone posted in group the other day, I did all these things for 6 months and I was feeling fantastic. So I stopped. Is that why my symptoms came back? And I'm like, yeah, we need to really kind of get back always on those things. And there are things that are like, you need to sleep well and eat well and hydrate and just like what I call the
Yeah.
basics. But the average person really doesn't either. I'm
Do
not
the
saying you don't want
basics.
to do them, but like in this world in 2024, it's like I could drink like 1 cup of water and like I guess I'll eat around noon like once a day and then like maybe I'll have a snack before I go to bed. Like that's kind
No,
of
the
how
basics are exhausting.
they're
The basics
exhausting.
are exhausting
They
to
are
do. Yes, they're a lot
100%.
of work.
They are. It's a lot of work to make sure you like eat within 1 hour of waking and make sure you have enough protein and did I
Yes.
drink enough water and did I have my electrolytes today? Did I take my supplements? Do I need to go for a walk? I probably do. Did I see the sunshine today? It is exhausting. It's
It is.
absolutely exhausting. So I tell people to aim for either 100% of the things 80% of the time or 80% of the things 100% of the time. So whichever way you
Yeah.
want to look at that, like from a B plus attitude.
Yeah, and I struggle with that
It's
myself
hard.
too, and I feel guilty sometimes. It's easy to like get down on yourself especially
Mhm.
for when I had my stressful week last week. I mean,
Totally.
I forgot my acute meds at home, so we had to come back for them. I forgot to take my supplements. I forgot I definitely wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't sleeping. And I'm just like, how am I existing right now at this point? Because I'm not doing anything right. But I had been working so hard at it the few weeks
Mhm.
before. And I think that really helped to kind of carry me through
Totally.
along with my mindset because it's it's like working out, like you don't see results that day, but
Mm-mm.
with consistency and time, you start to see those results very
Mhm.
slowly. And then when you stop working out for, a week, you're not going to go back as
Mhm.
quickly as you would, with you're still going to see those results. It's not like they
Mhm.
all go away because you've been doing them for so
Totally.
long. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just like I love that comparison with working out because it's not like you don't work out for a week and you lose all of your muscle mass. Like it just doesn't work that way. But also, one day of an exercise is never going to get you to your goals. So it really is
Right.
just about that gentle consistency and doing it most of the time. And if you're not perfect, like that's okay. And frankly, that's expected. Like I would never
Yeah.
expect anyone to be perfect, myself included. Like I don't like I try to eat my body weight in protein in grams every day, and I was telling Dr. Jenna about this, and, my other friend was sitting there, and I had told them, like, separately when I was in Minneapolis, they both live there, and one of my friends was like, "Aren't you gonna order, like, something with, like, a ton of chicken?" And I was like, "No, like, we're out to dinner, like, it's a chill day," like and Dr. Jenna goes, "You don't do that 100% of the time, do you? That's crazy." And I was like, "No." Like, maybe
Yeah.
80% of the time I hit that goal, and that's okay, but I do see a difference, like, I feel a lot better. So, it's always gonna be trial and error, switching things up, and being nice to yourself when you don't hit the goal.
Yeah. The protein has been a game changer for me too. I don't know if it's just I'm really working on my hormone health postpartum because
Same
with
girl.
Lila, I feel like
Yeah.
things change. And I don't know if that's me getting my upper 30s or what it is and kind of freaking out, but I'm trying not to freak out. But I think that the biggest game changer for me was actually having it for breakfast. And I
Mhm.
do try to get it in with the other meals, but starting off your day with it has been, you have more mental clarity. I'm less irritable. If you have more energy, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, the energy that you have is incredible.
Really is.
So I just I really think that's a key component that a lot of that we're kind of missing in the migraine community too is more of that conversation around that.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's more of a hormone health thing or what. I know diet in general is very controversial for migraine,
Yeah.
but I do think that components like that we're really missing with
Mhm.
patients too.
I totally agree. It really helps set
Yeah.
up your blood sugar for the day. I had a glucose monitor for a couple weeks, and another one of my
Okay.
friends, he did too, and it really helps, like, stabilize your blood sugar throughout the day, and he noticed that, like, if he has, like, a high fat, high protein breakfast, like, not regardless of what he eats the rest of the day, he was doing this longer than I did, but and
Huh.
he's a boy rather than a girl, so, like, things are different, but he's like
Yeah.
he's like, if I have, like, high protein, high fat first thing in the morning, kind of regardless of what I eat the rest of the day, like, my blood sugar is significantly lower and more stable, not, like, low glycemic, but, like, within lower normal ranges through the rest of the
Yeah.
day if I, like, set myself up for success almost. So some people will be like, "Breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day," whatever, whatever, but there's a lot of stuff coming out right now that, like, women shouldn't be intermittent fasting, and especially if you have migraine, because getting that,
Oh.
like, first thing, like, that's when your cortisol is supposed to spike. Your cortisol should spike in the morning, and you're kind of, like, helping that
Yeah.
along, and then your brain is water and fat, basically, but it's also run by hormones, and hormones are built with protein, and so
Mhm.
by getting that, like, 30-ish grams of protein first thing in the morning, your body's like, "Oh, I can build hormones now. I can, like, ask them to do what they need, and then I have the enzymes to break them down and therefore excrete them," which is also a
Okay.
problem, like, near your period. If you don't, like, get rid of enough hormones through, like, your liver and kidneys and you pee them out, then you have too much
Mhm.
estrogen, and then you're gonna have worse symptoms. So a lot of people are like, "I don't have enough estrogen," but really, they might have too much. So it's really kind of, like, person dependent, but ultimately, it helps with you're right, it helps with your hormones, it helps build and break things down, which is what your body is supposed to be doing all day. basically.
Yeah. I mean,
Long-winded
I've
answer.
noticed a huge change just in myself. I mean, a lot of these changes that I've been making have really helped me sleep. So I'm no longer waking up in that like 2 to 3
Mm,
a.m. part of my night. And,
awesome.
as long as the kids sleep, I get good sleep. And that to me is like crucial for my migraine management too.
Absolutely.
So it's it's such a discovery process, and it really is trial and error.
Hmm.
There are some things that I'm not sure I'll continue with, but other
Hmm.
things that like
Yeah,
that one, having the protein in the morning has been like game changer for me.
100%. I think that everyone that I've asked, it's like not the first thing, you can do it in whatever order, but one of the first things in the basics of vestibular group fit is like morning routine
Hmm.
and more protein. And every single person who has done it so far has messaged me or posted in the group, like, this has made a massive difference in my life. And so
Hmm.
if you learn one thing today, take away from this podcast, like just eat protein for breakfast, please.
And it doesn't always have to be eggs.
It doesn't. There's so many options.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I that's the thing for me too, is I kind of struggle because eggs are so easy, but I'm
Totally.
really starting to look outside of that now, and
Hmm.
different avenues of getting that protein in for
Yeah.
breakfast. So yeah, it's don't feel like you just have to eat eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. You do not have to eat. Plus, eggs are only what, like 6 grams of protein per thing, which means you need at least 4 to hit 24 grams. And so that's just like a lot of people are like, I'm not having 4 eggs.
Egg.
Like, I'm
Well,
not doing
so what
that.
I do,
Let's hear what
what
yeah,
I
you're
usually do is I mix like 2 eggs with egg whites, and
oh, awesome.
then I will mix in. So I have these like breakfast sausages from my first
Mm,
cookbook that I love, and
yum.
I'll sometimes do them with turkey or chicken or beef or
Hmm.
whatever I'm feeling, and those can go in my freezer. So we'll just unfreeze those and microwave
Hmm.
them. And you can make those into like breakfast tacos with some. I'll put some cottage cheese on top instead of sour cream,
Hmm.
and like that alone is like 30 grams right there. So you could
Easy.
do breakfast tacos, you could just have them separate.
Hmm.
But like that, adding in that like breakfast sausage component, that's
Hmm.
just like homemade and lives in your freezer. I love to do that. So
Totally.
I'm one of those people, I can't have leftovers for breakfast. I need like
Mm-mm.
actual breakfast foods. I
I do too. Dr.
know
Jenna's
that
could,
works for some people,
yeah,
but
Dr. Jenna will do that. Literally anything. And she, when we lived together in grad school, she's like, anything with an egg cracked in the middle is immediately breakfast. So she would just like make whatever she had the night before, just crack an egg in it. And she's like, it's breakfast, which is like, it works for her. So whatever.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
pretty funny. Yeah.
lots of things are good with a fried egg, so I
It's
won't knock
true.
that.
I will not knock that either. Literally whatever works for you. I am
Yeah.
a protein powder in my coffee kind of a person, and then a couple of
Okay.
eggs. That's like my go-to when I'm like in
Yeah.
a rush. But even if I'm in a rush and I can't cook myself eggs, like just a scoop of protein powder, I mean, I do not feel full. I have to have a snack in like an hour and a half, but at least I will have
Okay.
like gotten that in within an hour. So that's like my
Hmm.
easiest go-to.
Way to go.
Yeah.
I have a
Hmm.
my go-to is like I have this cottage cheese smoothie on my website,
Ooh,
like frozen strawberries and
yum.
cottage cheese. And it like cottage cheese always sounds gross to people, but if you
I love
blend it,
cottage
it's
cheese.
like a game changer. So I love it. It's like kind of like a strawberry cheesecake
Hmm.
type smoothie.
Yum.
But yeah, it that alone will get you your 30 grams right there. And if you mix
Beautiful.
it with the protein powder, yeah.
Totally. Totally. And there's some really good clean ones. Like please like read the back of your ingredients and all of the
Hmm.
things. But my blender recently broke and then I ordered a new one and then we moved and so I never unwrapped it. But I'm very excited for summer to be here and to start making smoothies because I'm gonna like unwrap it. It's like a whole thing. It's been like
Wait, what
sitting
did you get?
just like not a super fancy one. I got like a
Okay.
single serve one because we used to have
Like
renters,
a
and so I just bought like
NutriBullet?
a yeah, like some, but I think it's like a nicer brand than Nutribullet, but it's like that. I
Okay.
got off my
I
wedding,
have
but
a
I have some
NutriBullet and
like
I love it.
yeah, yeah. I had
Yeah.
one of those in college, and I have since lost it, but
Yeah.
it was like on the wedding. What I have some like wedding money left over that like is stuck on the
Okay.
website, so I have to buy products, and so I got myself a
Oh,
blender. Yeah, kind of fun.
that's not a
Who's
bad thing to have.
no, it's
Yeah.
not. It's not a bad thing to have consider I need to buy a whole new kitchen now. So we're working through it. Anyways.
Whenever I finally shoot these recipes that all melted in my freezer last week, I'll send them
Oh,
over.
thanks. I need them. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love cottage cheese. I love it. I don't know. Maybe I'm like the freakazoid over here who's like obsessed with cottage cheese, but I think it's great. And it is so much protein in it. And also, if you have like scrambled 2 eggs and put cottage cheese in them, they get like the good cheesy pull
Fluffy.
situation. They get fluffy. They
Yeah.
get really good. So that's also an easy
Yeah.
way to do it.
I don't know. The texture always bothered me. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, once I started blending it, I actually started discovering you could blend it because I was looking for a sub for sour cream for people on
Oh,
the
yeah.
migraine elimination diet. So I tend to have trouble with yogurt myself, and
Hmm.
sour cream was always kind of scary for me to
Hmm.
reintroduce. I've been able to reintroduce it successfully, thankfully,
Awesome.
but uh, it so I was always kind of looking for a sub for people who couldn't tolerate it.
Hmm.
And that's when I started blending it. I'm like, oh, this is a game changer because it really does taste like yogurt.
Yeah.
And it's got that kind of salty flavor to it.
Hmm.
So it's good, like combined with sweet things because you get kind of like that sweet, salty mix to it.
100%.
That's so great. So I'm working on some recipes with it this summer. We'll see. I'm
Ooh.
going to try to do like a salted caramel type
Ooh.
ice cream with it, but we'll
That
see if
sounds
it works
really
out.
good.
I don't
I want to
know.
make, now that you say that, I want to make like a salted caramel popsicle situation with cottage cheese or something.
Oh, that's really smart. Yes.
Sounds good. You can have it. I'm sure I won't figure it out until you do it. Then I'll like be copying it. So,
So that's what I have my one of the recipes I'm shooting, they're like cottage cheese popsicles.
hmm.
So
Oh my God. Yeah.
I have them kind of mixed with some fresh berries. So we'll see how they
Yum.
turn out. I don't know.
Sounds
They've been
awesome.
frozen and unfrozen like 5 times.
As long as they're still in the casing, who cares?
but
The kids will
but
love them.
hopefully
That's
by the time this
hilarious.
comes out, they'll be up. Yeah.
I hope so too. Yeah. Well, I'll link it. Text it to me
Okay.
when it's out and I'll put it in the show notes if it's out before.
Perfect.
Um, the lady taking a picture of my window and I don't love that. Okay, I think she's done. Okay, that was strange.
Oh,
Um, I don't
she's
know.
scoping your house.
I think so, but she lives in like an almost identical house that whatever, it's irrelevant. Okay. So so um anyway, what was I gonna ask you next? We covered acute treatments, your preventatives. One thing I think a lot of people are curious about is like returning to work. And I never want to like rush these things. It's just like we talked about before,
Right.
it takes time. Like if you're like, I've been feeling like pretty good for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and like I had an attack, that's normal. We expect like
Yeah.
some things to flare and we also want you to have like things that you can do about it.
Yeah.
Um, but also like how do you kind of return to either a working environment or if you have like an idea to work for yourself, how have you kind of gone about that?
Yeah. So I did not do this successfully at first. So let me tell you my story with it.
Yeah, please.
I originally I had a really stressful working environment. So I used to work for Fossil Corporate and we did work on lots of different watch brands. I worked on a brand called Michelle, and they were really, at the time, they had acquired some new brands. I think Tory Burch was one of them. So they had moved a lot of my team over to that brand and kind of left me alone to manage what was still a very large watch brand by myself. And, this was without any sort of pay raise or any sort of resources to help me. And so I was really stressed out working on this. And this was kind of the time that my vestibular migraine all began. And what was troublesome was before I found Dr. Bay and originally got my vestibular migraine diagnosis, I was seeing ENTs and neurologists and everything, and no one really knew what was wrong with me. So all they would send me home with was a diagnosis of vertigo or anxiety or all these different things. But my my HR company wasn't taking that as a legitimate reason to be off work. So once I got approved for that, my life became a lot easier and I was on short-term disability for a while. I was nervous that if I didn't come back quickly, that I would end up without a promotion that I had already worked so hard for and spent so much time on. and that they would find an excuse to not give it to me. So I pushed myself to come back almost too early. I was feeling slightly better, but I was still having daily symptoms. And so I guess the big difference was I felt a little more comfortable driving, not all days, but some days. And so with that, once I came back to work, all the problems that I had before came back with me. And I hadn't really dealt with those successfully mentally. I hadn't really set up my boundaries of what I would and wouldn't do. And so that sort of compiled with the fact that they changed my job when I came back, which wasn't legal. So something for people to watch for. But they had changed the location of where I was sitting to an area that was more stimulating. They had changed my manager. They had changed, so much about my working environment and not really given me any accommodations for migraine. So initially, I tried to come back. Dr. Bay was really concerned about me coming back full time. So we tried to do like an intermittent FMLA. The problem with that is like you can't tell someone when you're going to have an attack, it just kind of comes. So intermittent FMLA works better for people who like know when they have doctor's appointments versus someone who's like gets random vertigo attacks, because when you get a random vertigo attack, you're not going to call your insurance or your company and be like, "Hey, I'm out," like so you're over the toilet. So I it was a huge stress coming back, and it just wasn't working out for me very well. And I started to notice myself slipping back more and more and more. And there was nothing that I could do to get back on track besides leave my job. So there was a catalyst for it. At one point, I had a fight with someone else in the office who didn't really understand my job. This was a new person they had put on. And I went and I dropped off my resignation letter to HR, and I had written it for weeks before, but I just hadn't given it to them because it was a huge thing for me to leave. I had been there almost 10 years and I had identified with my job. It was really who I was at the time. And I'd worked so hard to get there. And I think in that moment, I just kind of made the decision that like it was either my health or I could continue down this path and end up back where I was debilitated. And then not only would I suffer, my family would suffer. Everything that was important to me would suffer more. So I made that decision to leave, and I would take care of myself first and find something else. Now, I know this is like coming from a huge place of privilege, and I had my husband to lean back on, but it's going from two incomes to one is still a challenging thing. And especially when you have lots of medical bills too. And losing that insurance for myself too was pretty devastating as well, because you can't just get right on your spouse's insurance. So I was paying out of pocket for a lot of my visits to Dr. Bay and all these other people. It's very expensive. So in that time, I was looking at other jobs, but I was looking at things. My therapist had me work on things that made me happy. And so she had me write down a list of all the things that I loved to do that weren't really work to myself. And these were things that I, you know, taking care of the dogs, I loved to do. I loved gardening. I loved cooking was my big one. And so I kind of looked at this list and I thought, okay, well, maybe I go to an animal shelter for a little bit or make calls for them or try to find a place where I could just work over the phone and, meet with families or interview families to see if they were a right fit for someone's dogs. Or this is where I really leaned into migraine diet and I started cooking more, and I was leaning into that more from like a health perspective. And that gave me a huge boost in my confidence, and it made me feel like I was contributing to my family, even if I wasn't financially. And so we all know where I ended up with the food thing, but I had lots of different paths that I could go down that were maybe not the biggest contributor financially, but would help me mentally from that perspective, keep me working, keep me active, and provide somewhat of a small amount of income. When I started Dizzy Cook, it was a lot of investing upfront and not a lot of income coming in. So you kind of have to bet on yourself. And I had to bet on myself from that perspective. It was easier to work on without kids. All of this was easier to work on without kids. I think it's a lot different when you have a family who depends on you. It makes it a little bit harder. So, I know not everyone can just leave their jobs, but if you can kind of figure out a working situation, I think I would have done this had I had more support, either from a workplace lawyer or someone else that like knew more about it. You can ask for accommodations at your workplace and really fight for those better. So if you're in a job where you have to make it work, like that's the route to go. If you have the opportunity to change, maybe you change to something that brings you a little more happiness. Um, and that's just kind of how it's gone for me. And now I have more flexibility. Like if I do have a hard day, I can take that time away from the computer. It's it's not always the case. Sometimes I have to show up and wear my migraine glasses and still do the work. I have deadlines and stuff like that, but it is a lot more flexible to support me where I'm at and how I'm feeling that day. And I think it's made a huge difference in my healing too.
I love this idea that you said of like making a list of all the things that bring you joy. Because I
Hmm.
think so many people say, well, I'm just like going to go back to work when I feel better. I'm going to play with my kids when I feel better. I'm going to take care of the dogs when I feel better. I'm going to go to wherever when I feel better. And the way to ultimately say, I'm going to manage this dizziness and it's not going to stop me is to do the thing dizzy and do it scared, which I know is a
Yeah.
terrifying thing. So like saying I'm going to make a list of these things and I'm also going to make this my job is amazing and
Hmm.
so scary, but it
Yeah.
does ultimately almost always work out in the end when you do it in that direction instead of trying to wait and say like I'll start a food blog but not until I feel better.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've got to do these things while you're still healing because you've got to find the things that give you purpose. Because if you feel
Hmm.
like you have a purpose in the world, you have something to live for, you have excitement to get up in the
Hmm.
morning, you feel like you're contributing to your family, to yourself. I mean, it provides so much
Hmm.
benefit to you. And so if you can find that one thing that makes you excited, I mean, it could be anything. But if you can make that into a job too, that's even
It
better.
is. I think in Japan they call it like ikigai. I'm sure I'm butchering that word. It's like when your life and your passion and something else come together. Work.
Okay.
I don't know, something along those lines. But it
I
seems,
think I know what you're talking
yeah,
about. Yes.
again, I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it is so nice when that happens. And ultimately, like if you work at a job you hate, but it pays the bills and like on your off time, you can do something else. That's 40 hours a week
Yeah.
that are not ideal, but like it hopefully pays the bills and whatever. But find things that bring you joy outside of those things. And if you're like, I absolutely cannot do those things right now, it's like, how can you break those things down and make them reasonable, right? Like when you were
Yeah.
at your dizziest, it's like cooking probably was not the most comfortable.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, it used to take me almost 2 hours to complete like a 30-minute recipe. It was not pretty. I used to have a stool and I used to sit there and I would have to take all my ingredients out. Like this
Hmm.
was vestibular therapy for me, is I
It
would take all
is.
my ingredients out and make my mise en place, which is like all your ingredients in the separate bowls so that I could concentrate on those and then put them all together. It was just a giant process, but what I did was I put on music and I would have like a little mocktail or something that I would like to drink. And it made it more of like a relaxing, fun event versus like, I have to try to do this and get this on the table. And I think if you can slow down with yourself and just take things, try to like savor those moments a little bit almost. It's hard to do when you're feeling dizzy, but just slow down, be in the moment, try to take it very gently, be gentle with yourself and be like, wow, I'm doing this. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
creating this for my family and they're going to enjoy it. I'm creating this for myself. It's like a whole different mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting at the end of the day, like after I created this, I could sit down with my husband to eat it. And I just felt so proud of myself because I would sit there and argue with insurance companies all day. I would struggle with walking down the street. I felt like pretty worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And if I just did one thing this day, which was like cook this meal, it made me feel so good about myself. I think you've got to find those things that make you feel good about yourself.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
it's like one thing. You don't have to make every moment perfect. Like the whole day
Yeah.
doesn't have to be great, but like find one thing that brings you joy. And even if you do it and don't feel great doing it, like you've still done it. And that's something to really be proud of yourself for. And it gives you a lot of hope and all of the things. And it kind of brings us back to the beginning where you set yourself goals that are not like, I want to wake up tomorrow morning and not be dizzy. I wanna wake
Yeah.
up
Oh, yeah. You
tomorrow
can't do
that's you can't do that, and
that.
everyone
I
does it.
mean, you hope
Everyone
for
does it, and
it.
it's yeah, and it's so
Yeah.
hard
You can
not
have
to do.
hope for it.
Yeah, you can have hope for it, like,
um,
yeah, but it's
Yeah,
hard
I don't
not to
know
do.
I don't think I've met anyone who just woke up the next day and wasn't dizzy.
I
How do you
haven't either.
have you had
No, and we
anyone in your
know
group?
I know,
No.
and I feel like we know all of the dizzy people between the 2 of us,
Yeah.
like, or at least not all of them, but
I've
a
seen some
big
people
chunk.
recover really quickly, a lot
Totally.
faster than I did, but
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah, it's not an overnight thing, but I remember hoping that it was an overnight thing, and one day I would just wake up and feel normal, and
totally.
unfortunately, that was not the case. But, like, now it's more common for me to go to bed and think, "Oh, I'm gonna be normal tomorrow,"
Mhm.
versus be in a
Which
really
is
bad place,
great.
which is yeah, it's comforting,
Yeah, that's a big
you
deal.
know? Yeah, I will never take that for granted
Mm-mm.
anymore, ever.
Yeah, definitely. And I
Yeah.
mean, I think most people take their health for granted until it is no longer a thing. And it's so hard when something that's so out of your control at first is controlling
Mhm.
your life and you're like, I don't know what to do, what to change, how to handle it. Like it's just such a frustrating, difficult thing. But you're a testament to it. Like there are so many people who are testament to this. Like it does get easier and it does get better. And you
Mhm.
just need to find the things that work for you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's it. You summed it up perfectly.
It gets better, team. It really does.
It does.
Um,
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I
me too.
promise it gets better. I know it doesn't seem like it like now right now, but I promise
Mhm,
it does get better. It's just
mhm,
sometimes you're in a bad situation or you're in a situation that you can't always change. You're limited with the doctors you can see.
mhm.
It's tricky, and I just think that I had so many things go my way with like the right. I mean, how lucky was I to have one of the top doctors in this happen to be in my
Yeah.
backyard, and he just so happened to have an interest in vestibular migraine. I mean, that is just crazy.
Mhm,
So I think a lot of things in my life have happened very serendipitously, where I consider myself just very blessed from
mhm.
that perspective,
Yeah.
because sometimes it all works out and you have that doctor in your backyard and you get on
Yeah.
that right treatment plan, that med works, and then other times you have the skunk in your in your grill that just sprays you.
Or your kid who doesn't know why they smell like skunk now.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not forever
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
Oh
No,
my goodness.
Reddit tells me it will eventually go away. So
Oh
apparently
my
that gets
goodness.
better too.
Oh my goodness. How frustrating. Not. And one thing I really wanted to reiterate that you said, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it again, is you have to have a good attitude about it.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to do, but the more you sit there and be like, sometimes embrace the suck. I'm all about once in a while embracing the suck and having a good cry about it and doing all the things you need to do. But if you do not believe that your body has this inherent ability to want to get better and that it is
Mhm.
protecting you and that it is trying to do its best, and you're like, my body doesn't work, I can't do anything ever again, I'm stuck like this forever, like that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So changing your attitude is really, really important. And I cannot stress that enough.
I mean, that's what you see in the groups online
Yeah.
is you see people like that. And I
Yeah.
remember I used to go into those groups myself and be like, I see these people who have this for years and years and years and
Hmm.
they're miserable. And that's what they always said. Like, I'm never
Yeah.
going to get better. I've never. And it's interesting going back and reading now as someone who has improved to see that
Yeah.
attitude changes between how I approached it and how they
Hmm.
approached it. And I really do think that there's a difference in how you
Hmm.
think about it mentally and that hope, you
Hmm.
know.
Totally.
All right, my husband did say the other day it was from that line from Ted Lasso, the hope it's the hope that kills you. I was
It
like, oh,
also
that's
saves, yeah.
terrible. Don't tell me that right now.
No, hope is what saves you, Ted.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we all learn that if
Yeah,
we
we
watch Ted
do.
Lasso,
Yes,
but
it's true.
yeah.
I love that. If you haven't watched that show, go and watch it. It's so
Yeah,
good.
Ted Lasso, it is such a feel-good show. I would
It
say that's
is.
like another thing that really helped me too is like sticking with the feel-good shows.
Totally.
Rather than watching like the fighting on Real Housewives
Mhm.
and stuff.
Mhm.
I think that watching those things that kind of bring you joy like that, even if you can't bring yourself joy,
Yeah.
it can make a difference
It
too.
really does. It really does make a difference. It really, really
Yeah.
does. Well, anything else you feel like you wanted to say? I know we talked a little bit at the beginning about like the Mediterranean migraine diet and like how well that can work if you don't want to maybe do something so restrictive, or you're like afraid of doing like elimination versus reintroduction, which you have to reintroduce foods. Which,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's important.
So we talked a little, I don't know if we got recording when this was happening, but basically I'm kind of focusing this week on giving people what I like to do is give people all the options for
Hmm.
migraine diets and just kind of support them where they're at. So I am really passionate about the Johns Hopkins / Heal Your Headache migraine diet because it made such a
Hmm.
difference for me in my healing. But I can recognize that it's not right for everyone or that it can be
Hmm.
done improperly too. So I try to explain that to people. It can be a complicated process if
Hmm.
you don't go about it the right way, or you don't have a lot of support. And
Yeah.
so I try to support people with it. So all the all the recipes on my website are Heal Your Headache Migraine Diet. They fit that
Hmm.
process. And so I overall between my books and that, I think I have over like 500 recipes or something like
It's
that.
amazing.
So to me, it doesn't feel as restrictive as it could be for someone else who's trying to include other things like maybe gluten free or dairy free
Hmm.
on top of what that list already is.
Hmm.
But I can recognize that it doesn't fit right for everyone, like any migraine treatment out
Literally
there.
anything. Like Gammacor
Yeah,
isn't right for everyone. Like all the
right,
things.
exactly. Yeah, what works for me doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, if I wish it did, that would
Me
make life
too.
a lot easier.
Totally.
Uh, but so that's really why Dr. Bay and I created this Mediterranean migraine diet
Hmm.
book. And I'm really passionate about sharing that with people because, you know, Heal Your Headache is great and I love it. The migraine diet is great and I love it, but it doesn't work for everyone or
Hmm.
it can feel really limiting. And so in that sense, the Mediterranean migraine diet is really great because it's more of a long term way of eating for your health. So while
Hmm.
I started with the elimination diet, I've transitioned into this Mediterranean migraine diet, which really focuses it's it's more supported by science than the elimination diet, which I think
Hmm.
the elimination diet, and I talk about this today, but it's hard to study scientifically because we
Mhm.
are all so different and everyone's going to have different triggers. So it's really hard to support that and have evidence for it. Obviously, we have a lot of anecdotal
Totally.
evidence for it, but from a scientific perspective, the Mediterranean migraine diet will is more proven because it incorporates those things like the high omega 3s, low omega 6s. It incorporates
Mhm.
things like berries and why they're good for your brain health and how they contribute to your cognitive function and all that sort of things. Beans, vegetables, like what to include to support your brain overall. So it's
Mhm.
great for people with migraine. It's great for anyone who just wants to improve their brain health as a whole.
Totally.
And I kind of wish people would pay a little more attention to it too, because I think it's a great diet and it works well for a lot of
Does.
people. You just may not see those. It's like we talked about with the immediate results. Like
Mhm.
people see faster results, I feel like, from the elimination diet, but the Mediterranean migraine diet is more like the long term, slow burn
Mhm.
results.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what I kind of wanted to present is like both sides. And we talk about this in Vestibular 101 too, like
Mhm.
both
Yeah.
those options and how they can support you in that journey. Um, so I think I just wish more people would talk about, the Mediterranean migraine diet. I had
Well,
to get that
I
in there.
I love it. I mean, the Mediterranean diet, the Mediterranean migraine diet, like eat the people who are like the healthiest in the world eat like that. And
Hmm.
there's a reason they have so much longevity and so much good health and all of the things. They walk everywhere, they have community, they drink in moderation with other people, and they eat a lot of omega 3s and like lean meats and all of the things. And a lot of
Yeah,
vegetables, it's good for you. Like the
it's
average
really
person
good
is
for
not
you.
eating enough fiber, protein, like we've been talking about, way too much omega
Yeah,
6 and not enough 3. And like, it's just the way that people eat these days, right? The basics are hard. We don't
they
live in
are
a world
hard.
where it's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like where the Mediterranean migraine diet is a little bit easier than the elimination diet is it
Mhm.
kind of gives you those basics like, okay, well, just include more of these foods in your diet and eat
Yeah,
less of this kind of thing.
totally.
Like cook more with small changes you can do, like cook more with olive oil and avocado oil instead of, or even like butter than
Mhm.
cooking with seed oils or
Yeah.
uh, well, I guess now I'm so used to
It's
cooking with avocado. I'm like, what
me
else is
too. What
there?
else?
Yeah,
Canola
seed
oil?
oil,
What vegetable? Like, what do people use? I
vegetable
don't know.
oil, seed oils.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't use that. Yeah, it's just anti-inflammatory at the end of the day. It's
Yes,
good for your
exactly.
body. Mhm.
Yeah.
I've been not able to shut up about, like, not crazy, but, like, things I never would have thought I would say, like, 3 or 4 years ago, being, like, a medically trained physical therapist, like but, like, does your liver do what it's supposed to do? Like, probably yes, but does it need support? Like, do you have mold? Do you have inflammatory conditions, right? And the Mediterranean migraine diet can be really supportive of that, which is so great.
Yeah, I
Mhm,
agree. It's just an overall like really solid diet. So, and
mhm,
I love to eat like that kind of food
same.
anyway, like those flavors. But yeah, I have a lot of people who I see who are sensitive to citrus. And so,
Mhm,
like a lot of what we focus on in the Mediterranean migraine diet, we incorporate some of it here versus like an elimination diet would have you eliminate
mhm,
that for a period of time. But you can substitute things like spices like za'atar or sumac is one I use a lot in
mhm.
those in that
Sumac's
cooking too, and it
great.
it provides that great like tart
Mhm,
flavor if you
mhm,
are sensitive to citrus. So it gives you a lot of alternatives depending on if you have sensitivities to certain things too.
totally.
Like yogurt is one of my triggers.
Mhm,
That's kind of a staple in the
mm,
Mediterranean
mhm.
diet. But instead of yogurt, I'll just do cottage cheese, like the
Another
whipped
shout
cottage
out.
cheese we'll talk about. Yeah. I know everyone's gonna be sick of us with the cottage cheese thing.
It's good,
But
guys.
it's a good substitute, instead of
Totally.
I have a problem with certain nuts. I'm still
Mhm,
working on trying to reintroduce nuts, even
mhm,
like 8 years later. Okay, so I probably did a migraine elimination diet 6 years ago, I think.
mhm,
It's been a long time.
mhm,
And I am still working on trying to reintroduce foods. So it's
mhm.
never like, you just reintroduce things and they go away, and these are your triggers for life. Like,
Yeah.
your triggers can change as
Mhm.
your migraine threshold changes.
Yeah.
So as I felt better and not been in a period of trying to get pregnant or on hormones or whatever for IVF, I have been able to bring back certain foods
Mhm.
that used to give me dizziness. So I
Mhm.
think it's good to always reevaluate like what potential triggers are, and then also combine with that like what is else is going on in my life, like am I stressed, how's my gut health, what is like
Mhm.
the holistic part of me doing.
Totally.
um because it's interesting you mentioned that like once you start supporting your hormones and your gut health and stuff like that,
Mhm.
it can kind of make a difference for your overall migraine threshold too.
Absolutely. It's one of the
So
biggest
this is like
things
a
you can
whole
do.
nother conversation.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Well, actually, I know I could talk to you for hours. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really good point and something that I hope like everyone remembers and listens to. Like it's so important to like eat as many foods as you can, right? And like if one is definitely a
Yeah,
trigger for you, it's definitely a trigger for you and that's okay. But again, like
yeah.
trying it in a year when you're like, "Oh, I'm feeling pretty good." Like that can look a lot different than it might have looked a year ago and that's great.
It can. I always tell people, like, I think I willed myself to not to tolerate avocado just because I loved guacamole so much.
Totally.
But it used to give me, like, when I was first introducing foods, I remember it used to give me, like, very mild dizziness. It
Mhm.
wasn't one of my extreme triggers, but, like, as my threshold raised, like, I have
Mhm.
no problem with avocados now. Um, yeah, food triggers are tricky like that sometimes,
Mhm.
but it's always good. Now, the big ones that have always bothered me, like caffeine, yogurt, those still seem to
Yeah.
be an issue for me. And ones that I wish I could get past because that would make my life a lot easier if I could have,
Totally.
especially with two young
Coffee.
kids. I would love to have caffeine. But it just doesn't work for me. And so I've kind of accepted, some
Mhm.
of those, but
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to trial things still.
Yeah. Totally. I love that. I love that outlook too. It's a lot of hope, right? That's great.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate all the time
Sure.
and all the things. Where can everyone find you if they don't already? I mean, they probably follow you, but if they don't, where can everyone find you?
If you don't know me, you can find me at thedizzycook.com. That's my website. Tons of free information there. Recipes if you decide you want to do one of the migraine diets or just like good food too.
It is good.
And
Can
then
confirm.
yeah. And then all my social media is at thedizzycook.com. And then you can find my email on my website too if like you want to ever talk to me one on one.
Perfect. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madison.